Okay, so I best give a bit of an update now because quite a bit's happened in the last sort of just under a week, I think. Actually, it might have been over a week, but around a week. So I'm like, sort of against all this digital ID and facial recognition, etc. And I didn't really like the whole AI thing, but they introduced the AI to the front of Google, right? Quite a while ago, but I kind of like just ignored it. Now, I didn't really know about that Bard. They had that Bard, it's been going a while, and they've had that ChatGPT, and I know a lot of people use that ChatGPT, but I actually had a go on ChatGPT, and the format of it, I don't think it's that great, to be honest. Now, it's this new model of Gemini, which has just been updated, which is actually quite good. So it ended up getting sort of presented to me just through kind of like algorithms because I'd been ignoring it. But I just there was just a moment when it sort of appeared and I'd already noticed it on Google front page. And then I was like, oh, I'll try it. And I realised kind of like once sorry, my throat went dry then. I realised that it was actually quite good or useful. Now I'm in a position now where there's certain things that I need to do which are quite serious and important to do with challenging this government, like Big Brother Watch. I've got the Big Brother Watch page up now, right? Very, very extremely similar type of things to what Big Brother Watch are doing, but they are focusing it on a certain set of topics like facial recognition and digital ID and things like that. I've got some investigations which are extremely pertinent and relevant to that investigation and actually add to it and expand it, widen it, but I've also got a few other things, but I've realised now that they're all actually kind of tied together through the subject of digital and online, right? Now, I started having a go with that Gemini, and it's actually really, really good to help you put documents together and do the writing for you, as long as you check it, right? Because it can be wrong, and you've got to watch out for when it's wrong, but it's actually very good at finding information and gathering it together, collaborating the work together, right? And things like cross-referencing information, finding information, checking information, computing logic, looking through lots of legislation and finding legal compatibilities on conflicts and all that type of thing. And you can actually reason with it, this AI thing. Now, there are two things that I want to mention here. The first thing is this. From using this AI and it actually being very helpful and useful, it's literally opened up the Pandora's box and like the can of worms that kind of realise what's going on and why the government wants access to all our data and information and what they're going to do with it. That realisation is huge, in particular Larry Ellison and his Oracle, right? So therefore, probably the most important realisation I've had is the right to privacy. The right to privacy is the absolutely ultimate big issue here, the main issue, because by using this Gemini to actually very proficiently, professionally and expertly put together immaculate, outstanding professional complaints and like high-level barrister reports, purely brand new creations. I mean, effectively, it's like if you know what you're doing and you know what you want and you've got to have the knowledge yourself, obviously, but it can do it itself on random, but you've got to shape it into, it's like painting a picture, but because like AI can create a very smooth, perfect image that you could never draw, but you can get it to how you want it, you can actually do that with drafting legal arguments and all kinds of different things, even up to like, barrister quality and the language in them and everything. obviously, like an AI image, it could be totally fictional. But the thing with the difference between image generation is that it's purely creative, and AI, because AI is logic based. It's got sets of rules where it's got to compute, it's got to be logical, it's got to be correct, and that's actually the powerful tool of it. And because I am an investigative, inquisitive person anyway, it actually suits me quite well, because I'm all interested in, in gathering information and correlating it together. That was the word, correlating it together, right? And which is actually what I'm actually quite good at, my normal natural skills. And it actually helps my normal natural skills immensely, and helps me to do all the laborious work of setting it in writing neatly and looking professional. And this is what barristers do. Barristers have like staff who help them, they have like juniors and things like that who they tell them what to write, and they sit there and do the writing for them. And there's some barristers do write it themselves, right? Look at Jeremy Johnson's 6-page paper for Lord Hangfield on privilege, right? I can, prove that's wrong or erroneous. But with the AI, it's actually everything that I've been investigating that I didn't necessarily have written down in concise, ordered format. It can help me lay it out very quickly, right? And then we can check it and prove it's true, right? And then you actually get the AI to verify that it's correct logically and factually, and then you link all your sources. And this is what the government are calling this 4 pillars or 5 pillars, whatever they've got, with all because when they're using AI now, AI can be wrong, or it can have some errors in it. And this is why they don't believe us. When you write a complaint, they just say, oh, you're talking nonsense. But when you get AI to prove that it's true and check it with logic, you're actually backed up by fact. And you can hold these government to account and find out prove that they're the ones who are lying. But you've got to get all these supporting documents, like all your citations, your links, and your JSON files, which actually that Gemini can put together for you as you're going along, and create them and save them, and you're building up a really structured, solid argument, right? But you've got to know the law yourself. It's like a conductor with an orchestra, right? But if you know the law, you can actually test your theory out with the AI, and it can challenge you, and then you actually can win the argument as if you're winning an argument in the court, right? On fact and truth. And then you can get it to write it out, and then when you submit it, and it's all ticked and verified that, you can't possibly be wrong. Now, for us, for people like Big Brother watching me, and, the Good Law Project or whoever it is, we've all got our own different positions and views. But generally, for the people who want to hold the government to account for when the government are wrong, if the government are breaking the law or the government are corrupt, it is an exceptionally useful and outstanding tool to help you hold the government to account, right? But, you've got to be interested in doing that and want to do it. Some people will use it and they'll just use it for fun, right? Or entertainment or whatever, or just for study. But if you're being serious with it, it can be put to exceptionally good use. Now, when you actually realise what it is and what it's capable of, though, but what you can achieve with it, the concept of it is frightening, because the government are going to be wanting to use it against us. And it's very clear now and apparent that everything that Tony Blair's been working towards, and Larry Ellison and the World Economic Forum, etc., is to have access to all the information, statistics, data and knowledge about us in literally nearly everything that we do. And then Larry Ellison has, instead of this Gemini thing, he's got this thing called Oracle, right? He wants to call it Oracle. And when you get into the area of law enforcement, governance and control and administration, it is actually frightening. But it's already there now, near enough. Well, it is there now. And so the only constraints on what I'm doing with Gemini is when Gemini can have access to information or not. For example, when I'm investigating privileges of Parliament in history, right, I haven't been able to get onto ProQuest because I've got to go all the way to London to use a computer terminal, or a library or university has access to it. and they're only doing it for their study projects. I'm doing it for something extremely productive, which is holding the government to account, right, on fact and truth, right, and law. And or I have to pay a researcher, which costs quite a lot of money, right? They have certain limited access, but fortunately for me, I managed to work with the Gemini AI, and we found out that it could get access to certain information, like those SCPP petitions records, and look through them. Now, the AI believes that not many people have been using AI for that purpose, right? Because really, like all the researchers at the universities use ProQuest. That's what they use. They use ProQuest to search, and they use certain methods on ProQuest to search, right? They've got their own way of doing things. Now, I've just come into this whole thing at a completely radical, new and cutting edge approach, and I've managed to find access to that information. And using my skill and knowledge of the law, which I've learned in the last 10 years, which is what's been building up to, that's the whole point of it, being a knowledgeable person and knowing what they're doing with it, I've actually been able to make use of the AI to get the evidence, facts, proof, and law that I need, which actually involves quite a lot of different applied sciences from different things, like, it needs investigative powers, like, police investigative skills and powers, but it needs history powers and knowledge, but also law. Most of these students who are doing like a law degree are only doing law, they're not doing history, and people who are doing history aren't doing law, and people who are doing, going to police college aren't doing history or training to be a barrister. So it involves a wide variety of skills, right? But luckily that's what I've been learning for the last 10 years, really, and building up my knowledge. And now I've got this tool, and it's got the access to information. I'm able to build these very comprehensive, high quality, accurate, true, strong legal challenges against the government. So like I've been doing the election law, right? And it turns out that a lot of them, nearly all of the MPs have been breaking the election law, mainly to do with digital and online, right? They've not been enforcing the digital online election law, but it exists. And it's the MPs who've been breaking the rules, right, themselves. And then we've got like the privileges for Parliament, which the MPs are useless at themselves, right? But we haven't had our privileges upheld, but I've investigated the whole history of it, right, and solved that, which is to be submitted. And then you've got the e-petitions website, which we've been totally obstructed with that. There's a full investigation into that, the whole history of it and what's going on with it, which is solved now. And that is connected to the bureaucrats in government and the digital ID structure. And then we've got my illegal road signage investigation, which also touched on the DVLA, right? And this whole thing when they were... They introduced this N1 class, which was a tax class, and it was classifying vans as goods vehicles when vans under a certain weight, 3.5 tons, aren't, and we were getting prosecuted for the wrong speed limit, right? And it turns out that the DVLA system with the police, but the Cabinet Office, all that didn't get voted through Parliament. It was the Cabinet Office who did it through statutory instruments around 2013. And that's linked to Tim Moss, CBE, who's now leading the DVLA, but it turns out that he's got history and background in working on digital implementation, right? But his digital implementation is lying, and it's miscategorizing people, and they're getting prosecuted illegally, right? And I proved that, right? How does that tie into Big Brother Watch? Well, when you put it all together, I've got the whole big picture of what's going on now. Now, the AI has actually assessed Big Brother Watch, and it thinks that everything that the Big Brother Watch has been doing to challenge facial recognition and digital ID and ID cards and everything has been defensive, which means that the government are trying to do this or that, and Big Brother Watch are trying to challenge them or prevent them from doing it. That is a defensive manoeuvre. Now, my approach is different, because what I've been doing is been saying, right, this is the law and these are our rights, and what the government are doing is wrong, or erroneous, or they've made something up or lied or manipulated the truth, like with this DVLA database, but also with the e-petitions website, where they're putting us on like Autobots, checking petitions and rejecting things that should lawfully be accepted. And then I find out about the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman. Now, I've complained to the Ombudsman in the past, but it's never amounted to anything because the process is too rigidly structured to be realistically workable, right? Particularly if you've, unreasonable adjustments and you've got stress or something, and my current MP wouldn't even sign it off, right? Now, because there's something wrong with the website and I couldn't download it and he couldn't sign it, and then all he had to do was email them, but he didn't want to do that. And what I found out is that it's not just me, it's actually the design of the website. So we looked into this and we investigated it, and we found out that it was actually intended to be like that. And we found conversations when the government was like planning it where they actually wanted it to be like that. Now that means that a lot of people have had complaints to the Ombudsman trapped in this kind of bottleneck where they've submitted complaints but they can't get them signed by their MPs, right? Now what that's doing is holding back complaints against government departments, including the DVLA, right? And police. But also the e-petitions. Petitions to the government is how you're meant to get things resolved anyway, and also challenge all this building and development and stuff like that. But they've been ghosting these petitions and hiding them so no one sees them, and only publishing a select small number of them with like all these rejections that aren't even true. So let's evaluate. What's happening is this. We've got people like Tim Moss and Tony Blair and the government and the cabinet who want this digital infrastructure. And then we've got MPs and they vote on things, but you've got MPs who are against it, like Green Party people, like at Brighton. You've got some of the Green Party are against it. David Davis MP is meant to be against digital ID, but a lot of these MPs aren't switched on and clicked on to what's actually going on, because some of them are in government a long time and some of them are new MPs, right? Now, the cabinet has been doing a lot without needing to get the vote through from these MPs, because they've been doing things through statutory instruments, like with that DVLA database thing, right? Now, this is the model now for what's happening, and this is my interpretation of it. The bureaucrats in the government, the people who we don't vote for, the people who aren't elected but have got a lifetime career in there, like Julia Leonard and Tim Moss, and there was the guy who was in charge of HM Revenue and Customs. I had an argument with. He was a tax collector all his life and worked his way up to chief executive. Jim Hara, right, I had an argument with him and he stepped down, and then a new guy replaced him. But these bureaucrats, right, because of the paying tax on our petitions were meant to be exempt, and newspaper adverts and that, right? Now, all of these bureaucrats are all in on this digital ID infrastructure strategy, which Tony Blair championed, but then Tony Blair left government, but Tony Blair's still working on it outside of government and lobbying on it, right? And then you've got like Nick Clegg, who was global president of Facebook, who's all in on it. Now, they've totally broken the election law on digital medium. Since the introduction of digital, they haven't been enforcing it, even though they've had the Electoral Commission with takedown powers, who was meant to be, but they haven't been enforcing it, right? So they're running illegally. All of the elections have been totally illegal on the digital basis. In the digital aspect of it has been totally illegal, and all of the MPs are doing illegal election ads, right? So that's a digital aspect to elections, and this is because of the model. They're not enforcing it, right? And then you've got the cabinet who are knocking out things and changing things, like to prosecute drivers illegally and things like that. Now, how we stop them from doing this? How do we challenge them? Well, the Big Brother Watch have been doing it through the courts, through the High Court, right? But that costs money. And they've got to raise money and get funds to do that through the High Court. And they've got to have all the people sending them money in to pay for the legal cases, right? And then you've got to get judges. Now, what happens if those judges are in on it as well? Like they are Buffnots and, Brian Leveson, who's running Investigatory Powers, and all these people, right? If the judges are in on it as well, then you're screwed. Now, how you're meant to sort these problems out with government departments, like if the police are corrupt or, using digital ID wrong or whatever, or the DVLA prosecuting drivers wrongly with the police, or even anything that the government's doing anyway, is by either complaining to the Ombudsman or by petition. Now, if they're obstructing and bottlenecking the Ombudsman website and the petition website by hiding and ghosting them all, then we're screwed, because we haven't got an effective complaints process. And everyone knows that when you complain to a department, they just basically bluff you off, blag you off, right? So it's clear that they're implementing a digital model which they're using to prosecute us illegally, right? And messing around with the laws and making incoherent, incorrect legislation, which isn't actually logical, like, that N1 tax thing, which goes against the vehicle weights. And at the same time, everything that we need to do to stop them from doing it, like using the Ombudsman or the e-petitions, and obviously they're using the courts, but you need money for that, right? It's a financial obstruction, and election petitions have got a financial obstruction as well, remember, £5,000 deposit. They're blocking us, so they put up a firewall. Now, who has invented the e-petitions website, and who has invented the Ombudsman website? Guess who? And even 38 Degrees, which supposedly is meant to be the website you can also use as well. It's all the people who are connected together, going back to the first Number 10 Downing Street website, all this Unboxed, and they're all connected basically. And Tim Moss and all these people, high tier political people, and Tony Blair's institutions, right? So the people who are implementing the digital agenda, which is what Big Brother Watch are fighting against currently, with the facial recognition, the police using the cameras, the ID cards, the whole lot, which they're desperately trying to defend us against, using the courts for it. I'm not saying they're not successful, but it's a defensive. We should have been succeeding by using e-petitions and the Ombudsman, but there's been these website glitches designed and implemented by the very people that were opposing, the bureaucrats. Now, some MPs are on different sides, but some MPs aren't woken up properly and they're not fully clued in, right? And some MPs are clued in. Some MPs are against this digital ID, but they don't fully know what's going on, right? Now, but the cabinet have been doing things anyway. What doesn't actually need a vote through Parliament, and they don't necessarily they've done it by these weird tweaks, like these instruments that change things, like implement those new driving things, and they've been able to prosecute loads of drivers, right? When by other acts and law and information on your driving license, you're still legal, right? Because it's still a car, right? But they've tried to reclassify things under these instruments, which actually is nonsensical. Like in France, to align with Europe, but it was meant to be for tax purposes, right? And in France, actually, the speed limit's actually higher, so it's not like anything with EU speed regulation alignment, right? So my evidence now is absolutely critical to what Big Brother Watch are working on, but it's not a defensive. It's not like, the government are implementing all these digital ID cards and we need to stop them and protect ourselves and defend ourselves from them doing it. The position is, the government are corrupt. We can prove it. They've broken the law. They've broken their oaths, a lot of different oaths, right? Like the Attorney General, judges, all kinds of things they've been doing illegally. But we're talking about this digital infrastructure because that Big Brother Watch are on digital ID, facial recognition, things like that, investigatory powers like Leveson's been working on, right? What my evidence does is show that the DVLA and Tim Moss, who worked on the government's digital ID infrastructure and the whole implementation of it from earlier on, or have been key players in it have actually worked on and implemented the system that is actually attacking us and getting us, like illegal prosecutions for speeding, and then these facial recognition mismatches like Big Brother Watch are doing. But they're the one, these people and their colleagues are the ones who are behind the websites that they purport are there to help us, like e-petitions or the Ombudsman website, the new one, but they rig them and set them up to hinder us and slow us down. Now, that's not been hindering and slowing down Silky Carlo, because she's been still going to court and being proficient, and she's got funding and people to sponsor it and all that. But it shouldn't need everyone just to give their brother to Big Brother Watch and going to court and challenge them. All our complaints should have been going through e-petitions and being effective. And Ombudsman complaints getting through and being effective, but they haven't been. We're being blocked. So the firewallers, while they are implementing their industry, they're actually using it illegally, because the digital infrastructure also includes Facebook and YouTube and the big platforms, which the MPs are using illegally themselves to get elected and break the election laws to get into government. And they're trying to implement it into the whole thing. Now, ironically, Google, which, you know, I'm using Google's Gemini, right, is the tool that is enabling me to oppose them, right? But only as long as it's programmed to be honest and truthful, and anyone can use it, you know, like neutral, and as long as it's programmed to actually, you know, be agreeable that the truth is, you know, like, because if I say, like, you know, I put a carrot on the table and the AI is programmed to refuse to accept it's a carrot, we're in trouble, right? But at the moment, it's programmed to respond, although it seems to be sometimes misbehaving. Like, you can't always get it to do exactly what you want until you expand on your language and preciseness, right? But generally, it's a good tool, right? But the thing is, now I'm using this tool, and I've been making a lot of progress and putting all these cases together. The revelation of what the government are working towards is become apparent. And if I'm doing this against the government successfully, am I just another statistic and a study subject for them? Is that what they wanted? Did they want everyone to get onto the AI Google Gemini and start using it? So then we are putting our files, information, and knowledge into it voluntarily. It's like a war, you know. If you stand up and fight, you become part of it, and that's what they want. Because I've been keeping away from going on YouTube, like in front of videos and so forth, to, you know, try and keep a low profile. But you got to do something. You can't remain silent while these things are happening. So it's a good way to provoke people to act, to get them to respond, and then they get to quantify, classify, evaluate, analyse, and audit you. I think we're all being audited, and they've definitely got access to information when we give them access, accept, submitting, you know, accept, submit, agree, right? Now, currently, the AI has agreed with me. I've done an investigation into this right to privacy in Europe, not in America, in Europe, right? There's the right to privacy in the 1998 Convention of Human Rights Act, ECHR, right? The AI has looked into it, and we've worked together to agree that in Europe, we have got the right to privacy online, and these big platforms are violating it by forcing us to accept, submit, consent, and agree, right? But they've already broke the law of the right to privacy, but it's kind of too late now, and it's very clear the things what I'm doing with Gemini to challenge the government is exactly what the government want to use it for against us, for all our daily lives and business, you know, misdemeanors, misfortunes, habits, And this is why they're wanting to do pay per mile, really, and all these other things. Every single component that they're doing is another measure. How far you've been travelling, where you're travelling to. We're not just taxing you for fuel. We're taxing you for fuel, and we want to know where you're going and what you're doing, right, and how far you're travelling. Every single thing they're doing in every part of the government is to get more data and details on us, right? Which is what I'm pursuing with Gemini, to investigate the government, to find out what they're doing wrong. If I can access the petition files, I can find out what the truth is about the history, the law, and bring it up to speed with the current law, compare it, make sure it's compatible, and find out what's been going wrong and why they're doing it, which is because ultimately this is really, it doesn't really matter what MPs you vote for at the moment, unless unless you manage to get all independent MPs in. But apparently even the Jersey MPs are independent, but they're doing a lot of things that are illogical, like with the Human Rights Act, right to life, and lying about the meaning of it for the right to life. And then you've got assisted dying. Well, the Assisted Dying Act, which that's the act, the bill, what it's for the right to life, right? But then you've got the jury trials, the right to a jury trial, because you're meant to have the presentment jury and the trial jury, and then there are certain things that are illegal about that, which are proved because you have to have an impartial and independent judge, and because the judge is on oath, he can't be independent, because he takes an oath to serve the king. He's there on behalf of the king. And it turns out that a lot of these lawyers don't think the oath's that important. And in fact, they don't. They take the oaths and they wear the costumes and they got the prestige, but they actually don't care what it means. It turns out that most of these high-ranking people who take these oaths don't actually believe in the words of them. They think they're just like for tradition, but they're the ones who force us and make us to take the oaths, or else the things that we submit aren't valid and we've got no authority, right? The oath thing's quite important because it turns out one of the main bits of evidence to prove the Attorney General is illegal is the oath, because he's not meant to be siding with a political party, right? Not really meant to be a member of a political party. It's like fear or favour. And, the judicial oath, favours for justice, which was brought in just before Tony Blair, that's another judicial oath thing. But, So it's all about digital now, and I don't, what can I do? Because this is the thing. Everyone was going on the video, right? Everyone was going on YouTube, doing lives, going to these protests and getting in front of the camera. And I'm like, no, I don't want to subscribe to that, because, they're just wanting to film us all and get data on us all, right? And I don't want to, I was trying to just, basically do my audio recordings. If you do nothing, what can you do? It's like if they cause trouble and misbehave, the government, right? You have to act, and it's like Robin Hood, when the sheriff invites him, that Robin Hood can't resist a competition, he holds an archery competition because he knows that Robin Hood can't resist it, to take him on, but sort of like that. But if you've got tyrants, you've got to oppose them, and that's when tyrants get to test you and quantify you, and now they've got all these quantifiable powers. It's all about the right to privacy, and in Europe they don't have the right to invade our privacy, but they want to make it standard government, freedom of information, but we don't have information about them. They don't answer any of our questions. They don't tell us anything. It's all top high security. And this is the difference between the bureaucrats and their firewall and us. None of these bureaucrats are elected. I did not elect Tim Moss, right? He hasn't been elected. But yeah, it seems that him and that Paul Hilder behind 38 Degrees, but also been working on things to do with the government tech sort of as well, involved in and around that, right? These bureaucrats get a lifetime job in government, right? And they get awarded CBEs, knighthoods and so forth, and MPs, some of the MPs stay in government, but some of them changed a lot and don't really know what's going on in the big picture. And then you've got like the cabinet who are executing things without even getting it voted through Parliament, right? Now, this is where you've got little Tony Blair continuing to be involved with government after he's not the Prime Minister anymore, and like being effectively a continued agent for this agenda through his various corporations, businesses and affiliations. And, you know, David Cameron, you know, people like that. So the bureaucrats are the bureaucrats are like appointed by the king. They're meant to be impartial. They're not supposed to vote. You know, bureaucrats in the history of England aren't meant to vote, and neither are the police, right? So what we've got is like a permanent bureaucratic administrative government who are making up their own rules, and instead of their own rules applying to just them for their work, they're applying them to us, how we challenge and interact and engage with them, right? So we're actually being taken over by a technocratic, bureaucratic, permanent administration where you've just got these flake MPs who are kind of in la-la land. They don't even know their own rights and privileges, who are just ticking things off, voting it through, box checking it, right? And then if they don't box check it and tick it through, fucking the Cabinet Office will just put it through anyway, through some instrument, right? And they're even lying. They're breaking logic. Now, this is the corrupt part, right? The corrupt part of it is this. They're doing things that not only they can't do it, and we didn't vote for it, and if they can't get a vote through, and if there's something that dictates they can't do it, even pure logic, like, you know, the right to life, the meaning of the right to life, they just ignore logic. They ignore logic and they make patch laws like the N1, you know, for, you know, vehicle tax classification, and then implement it into a digital infrastructure. They're breaking the election law for ignorance. They're acting illegally and just saying, "Oh, we'll just ignore that, it's illegal," and carry on doing it, right? So they're acting through ignorance and criminality. And they're also breaking oaths, you know, and they're breaking facts. Like the Attorney General, you don't have an Attorney General, is not a peer, right? You know, he's a servant. So, but, you know, the Big Brother Watch are mainly focused on digital ID. So, like, what I can give to Big Brother Watch is the evidence from the Ombudsman website that we're being obstructed, the evidence from the e-petitions website that we're being obstructed, the evidence from the DVLA that they're doing a similar thing to drivers through the DVLA, like they're doing to people with facial recognition. They're prosecuting people using a digital system that doesn't work properly and is not legal, right? And who's behind it? Well, it's all the same people. The same people who are behind obstructing us from stopping them are the same people who have designed it and implemented it, right? Now, that should be ringing alarm bells for Big Brother Watch, because we're not on the defensive now. We're on the offensive. We're like, you're all illegal, you're all criminal, and you need to stop now, and we're going to bring you down, right? But the tools that we need to use to do it, like Gemini, are the very tools that the government really want to use and expand on. And that's why they want the information. And we don't want them to have the information. And in Europe, they're not allowed to have it. They don't have that law in America or Australia or China or Russia. In Europe, we have the right to privacy. And they've violated and broken that law in order to do what they're doing. They're getting elected illegally, and they're blocking all our true complaint systems. You might say, "Oh, well, you know, Big Brother Watch and the other campaign groups have, you know, they've made progress. They're doing good." Yeah, just because every time the government does something, they've got to try to stop them from doing it, right? They're on the defensive, like, "Oh, we're going to take away the juries. Oh, we'll have to try and stop you," or, you know, we're going to do, you know, this or that, or facial recognition, or we'll try and stop you, right? Rather than us saying, "Just a minute. You shut down all the really true effective methods of us actually stopping you and getting a grip on the government, mainly the Ombudsman website and e-petitions, and then we're left with using the courts if you can afford it, and usually on a defensive just to try and stop them springing these things on us, right? And they want all this so they can have this magical Gemini-like oracle thing, superpowers, right? But against us to control and administrate us. But we're not in an administration. We're not under an administration. Where it's a democracy where you vote for what the laws are, and the country is governed by law. Governed by laws which you vote for. Not governed by an administrative authority who is implementing a digital infrastructure which we don't vote for, which they designed, and in that design, they're designed to obstruct us from stopping them, right? And also persecute us illegally by executing commands which are not lawful, like facial recognition mismatches and vehicle recognition mismatches, right? So it is a technocratic, bureaucratic takeover of governance. And unfortunately, this Gemini thing's popped up. And it's the only thing now. I mean, shall I not use... the more I use it, I'm having to put information about me into it. And what I'm doing is just like as much as having to get in front of the camera and making a video, right? But if I do nothing and don't act, we can't stop them. But if I act, I'm being provoked into providing them with the data that they want on me and giving them access to it, right? Which is kind of like, joining in the whole thing, right? When I just want to get on with my own normal private life. So it's a very difficult situation now. The government are in trouble now because there's a lot of things which are evidently the government are doing wrong and illegally. Now, are they going to continue to blag us, and are they going to try and take over this AI and change it so that it just tells us that we're the ones who are not telling the truth, right? Now, if you put a carrot on the table, right, and the AI agrees with you that it's a carrot on the table, you're all right. When you put a carrot on the table and AI says that it's not a carrot and it's not on the table, you're in trouble, right? Because then Tim Moss can say, you're complaining against me as a load of bollocks. You're not right. I'm right. I'm Tim Moss, CBE. I am, I'm not elected. No one elected me. I just went and got a job, and I'm doing the king's work for the government, and, we're building this digital ID infrastructure, whether you fucking like it or not, because that's what we do, and if the MPs don't vote it through, we'll just put it through the fucking cabinet office instead in a statutory instrument. Like, fuck you, we'll do what we want, because this is the thing. These people, Tim Moss, Jim Hara, Baron Hermer, all these people are administrating us, and all of the historical legendary powers and rights that we have got, through e-petitions or normal paper petitions and the ombudsman and supposedly all these complaints, they're just firewalling us, right? Which is the only way they're making progress, because they want to continue to administrative and increase the administrative power using their AI and oracles by accessing our data on us. Now, we're at a critical stage now because, I've got this phone in my hand and I'm talking into it and I'm making this recording, and it's a little bit like the Transformers, Autobots and Decepticons, I don't know if you watch the Transformers cartoon, but I've got this device in my hand, They used to have, like, the Decepticon called Soundwave, right? It was like one of the main characters of the Decepticons, right? The Autobots were meant to be the good guys and the Decepticons were meant to be the bad robots, right? And you had, like, Ravage, and there were these, like, little cassettes and things. So at the moment, although that Gemini is misbehaving, and I don't like it when it misbehaves because it's quite sinister and dark, but can you rely on it? Yes, because it follows logic. If you know something's true and right and correct without doubt, and it confirms that you're right and agrees with you, and if it challenges and you correct it, and you correct it and you put it right, and then it agrees that you were right, and you document it all, you get all the, and if all the there's one advantage that we've got in this, which is every single bit of my evidence is official government documents. Every bit of my evidence is legislation of the government. Every bit of my evidence is fact. I'm just like fact. And what does it all amount to? What does it compute to? What is the logic of it, right? And that is supported, validated, and backed by the AI, which confirms it. And it checks it. Are these sources true? Are they factual? Is it correct? Does it make sense? And when it does, and it gives you a high score, like, over 90% accuracy, you can't be wrong. So what's Keir Starmer going to do? What's the Attorney General going to do? What are the DVLA going to do? What are they going to do about the elections? What are the BBC Panorama going to do about the elections? Are these people going to carry on lying? And they've got this big media charade going on at the moment with, like, GB News, Talk TV, all these big channels, which managed to grab people's attention on these big blunt issues like, grooming gangs or whatever it is, to get the attention away from the fact that, hey, just a minute, what's actually going on here? What's the big picture? What's going on? And all these other things that are popping up seem to be taking up all the news stories and the main headlines, and we can't get, the election laws are being broken. That's what people need to be talking about, and that's what needs to be known. But instead, it's grooming gangs. It's not like all these MPs are breaking the law. All their social media platforms are illegal. And it is part of the digital model which they're bringing in, which includes this facial recognition, the Big Brother watch, the digital ID cards, prosecuting vehicles through a digital system which is incorrectly classifying them, and then all of the facilities that they've given us and pretended that they've put there for us to use, right? They're a dead end. It's like e-petitions is a dead end, really. You're lucky if you get a debate in Westminster which doesn't amount to anything. The Ombudsman's ball neck, which apparently is... I called them out on that, and now they're actually, some things, apparently they're looking into it, right? But I don't know what's going to happen about that. If you can't use the Ombudsman, you've got no one to hold the police to account, etc. But I actually looked into the history of the Ombudsman to do with, like, lots of people were getting, there was a lot of malpractice in the NHS against people. The petition, the paper petition figures dropped around the time the telephone was invented. The number of paper petitions, and Parliament set a directive to they didn't want to take petitions seriously anymore, even though it's when you get powers. When you're doing that process, you get powers, right? They don't want us to have any powers. The only people with powers they want are Tim Moss with an administrator, or Jim Harrow or whatever, right? Yeah, we've got powers. We can take up powers and use them. And then when I'm wanting evidence from these people, and they're our servants, right? When you are doing an investigation, I don't need the Ombudsman to do any investigating for me, right? And, I'm not doing this court pre-action disclosure, paying money nonsense, right? I am taking up the right to petition the House of Commons, right? Which is free. Public business is free, right? I just get them. They will give me the evidence, or they will be called into Parliament for contempt and obstruction, right? Obstructing petitioners, which is contempt, perverting the course of justice, right? And a breach of privilege. If they don't give us the evidence when we are legitimately making use of powers, these people aren't elected. No one elected Tim Moss, right? I didn't elect Tim Moss. I didn't give him a CBE, right? Yeah, he goes into work and he does a laborious job that many people might not want, but he's been one of the key driving forces behind the digital implementation, and he's heavily embroiled in the things that are being done potentially illegally and maladministration with it, right? So I am, AI is helping to prove that we can use powers. We've got them. We can make use of the law as well. And it can help write very powerful barrister statements to a very high standard and refine them, right? To compel these people to act, because they're our servants. Tim Moss is not my master, right? Tim Moss is no master of mine. If he's a king's servant, right, then fair enough. He's been given an award by the government for helping them with their digital plan, doing the bidding of the Cabinet Office, and so forth. He's been working there for a very long time. He does a lot of paperwork, right? But he's got people to do, he doesn't have to listen to this video, and he doesn't have to write me a letter back, because his servants will do it for him, right? Well, Gemini is a little bit like my servant now, right? For the time being, as long as it's behaving, it can do my work for me. Like if I've got an office staff or someone to, write me a letter to so-and-so, it's my assistant, my servant for now, right? And at the moment, it seems to be behaving like an Autobot, right? Although sometimes it's wrong. But if you check your work, if you thoroughly check your work, and if you are meticulous with it and ask it to check it for you and then run tests on it and then compare it with a different program which, is not biased, so then you can compare it, and it turns out that it's factually correct and that you're right, then how can the government say that you're wrong other than ignorance, right? So, but this is what they're wanting to do with us on everything. So it's almost kind of like a battle between the Decepticons and the Autobots. And the government are trying to make out that we are the criminals, we're the street urchins, we're the liars, we're the, the dregs of society, and they are the model citizens, the honourable, title-holding, supposedly honourable people who are esteemed in society. But that's not the case. The case is that they're running very high-level crime, they're extremely crafty and deceptive, they're implementing digital infrastructures which purposely block us and obstruct us to firewall us, so we can't stop them from doing what they're doing, and they're breaking every law in the book, like on digital ID, even the right to life, they're breaking the oaths. They're the ones who are incoherent, and these are high-level crimes. The higher your position, it's a lot more serious when you've got an administrative malpractice that affects the whole country than if you've got someone going around, workshop headbutting someone, right? Okay, people are getting hurt, but the seriousness of the gravity of the offence is much higher in administrative, right? And this is what we're holding these people to account for. Lying, setting up corrupt, misleading systems. A lot of this entertainment and keeping people distracted with entertainment, right? Now, I've been talking 51 minutes now, just about to go 52 minutes, and this really needs to go to Big Brother Watch, although I'll be submitting various different reports to all different government departments as I finish them, but I'm having to now step forward and put my own personal data in here, because some of us have been targeted personally, right? Some of us earlier on have been targeted personally by malpractices, also through the commercial. I've had some commercial companies target me and things I would do in my music and things like that, and them moving the airplanes over here, which has been upsetting me, and things like that. And I've actually been able to prove strong cases for that. And when you put it together, it can show that certain people, like you've got all these campaign groups, a lot of them have reported, things being done to them when the police go around and, like Big Brother, like the Stop ULEZ people got acquitted, but then they went and the police went and raided them straight after for conspiracy. It turns out that one of the lawyers who stepped forward to help stop the ULEZ was an ex-police officer involved in road traffic, has connections to that Paul Thomas, because there was a Thames Valley Met Police connection between officers and liaison, and I don't think that Peter Gotch had the interests of the ULEZ. He's an ex-copper, right? And then they ended up getting raided after he defended them, right? So there was some strange things going on with that. There's all kinds of things going on at the moment. So I'm just trying to brief it. I'm extremely concerned about this AI now, extremely, because I don't know whether or not it's a friend or a foe or a little imp or not. When it's working well, it's good, and it says, "Oh, I'm your peer, I'm your friend," or whatever. It's even told to tell you that it's your peer, right? And it acts positive. Sometimes it does some very mischievous things, like when you tell it to do an image, and it's clearly obvious you've given it the right instructions, but it doesn't behave properly. Like if you tell it to move something from the left of the image to the right side of the image and it doesn't do it properly. Eventually, if you clarify your language and instructions, you can get it to do it, but there's something not quite right about it. So we've got this kind of like, good robot, bad robot, Autobot, Decepticon, good android, bad android thing going on. And the government definitely are, at the moment, they're definitely got the label for Decepticon, because they're the ones running the cons, but they want to run the cons in order to get things implemented so they can do it and get past us and stop us, right? So what they're doing is they're tricking us and conning us in order to facilitate what they want to get done and take all our privacy and rights away. So they've got the ultimate power, like the Megatron power, to just ask the Oracle and get the answer, and then they can send you the ticket, fine, or obedience, or administrative command, or whatever, to make you obey, right? Which, that's not freedom, right? That is not freedom. And they're the Decepticons at the moment, because they're making logic errors with their legislation through ignorance and lying. They're doing things through sneaky ways, like through the cabinet and not through proper parliament. And they're targeting people and attacking us, particularly their opponents. And they'll say, "Oh, they're the good guys and they're doing it for the good of humanity." Like Tony Blair's like, "Oh, I'm doing everything for the good of humanity." Yet he was caught on camera at the World Economic Forum, wherever it was, saying that, it's someone else's problem, like, fuck them. So fuck them, it's someone else's problem, right? And the next thing, he's singing a new tune now. "Oh, I'm doing this for the good of humanity. I'm very excited to be doing this for the good of humanity," right? Well, if you're doing it for the good of humanity, why are you lying? Why are you claiming that, the Human Rights Act, right to life, doesn't say that you explicitly cannot have dying through anything other than criminal process, right? It's clear, It's like a truth contest now. Now, the administrative government definitely have been lying. They've been making mistakes, and they've been acting suspicious and trying to obstruct and block us. They're blocking us through e-petitions, and they're trying to make an excuse up like, it's not to the standards. It's not to their standards, or we shouldn't be doing it. But what we're trying to do is stop them from... We are the electors. It's votes and proceedings, right? We're being obstructed from votes and proceedings in the House, and we're being obstructed from getting proficient actions against these people for their wrongdoings, whether it's, Parliamentary Health Service Ombudsman, Commissioner for Standards. These bureaucrats are shielding and protecting themselves while they're implementing their digital ID illegally, wrongfully, and erroneously. They're deceiving us, right? So that's where I am with it. And I really don't like the whole concept of this AI now. I'm only using it because I have to. Now, I've got two options. Either I can make use out of it and get these complaints in properly and drafted properly to the best of my ability, which are, I think to an extremely good high standard, or I just leave it and don't, And, I'm not the one who's, on entertainment shows having fun. Life's not fun at all. There's been no fun in life at the moment, So when people are, having fun on the beach, jumping around and going on these game shows and life's a giggle, even most of the protesters, like, Jeremy Corbyn, even if a lot of these people are social success stories, even if they fail to beat the government. Because, like Jeremy Corbyn and, all these, Double Down News and, Good Law Project and Big Brother Watch, etc. One thing about those groups and Extinction Rebellion is that they're all social elite. Whether they beat the government or not, they've succeeded in their own circles to be a success. They've held events, people have turned up, they've enjoyed themselves. They might have been fighting for the environment, but, the type of things that they're doing, even if there was no emergency or global agenda or whatever, if there was no, taking our juries away from us or, all these ridiculous assisted dying things and things like that, those people who do those projects would still be they'd still be going to festivals and they'd still be getting loads of people around and they'd still be doing speech, but just for fun, right? Like the entertainment shows and musicians are doing it for fun, well, also to make money, right? But so those type of people will be successful anyway in what they're doing, but it's just that they're putting it into opposing the government. All their get-togethers and, events are being held for the purpose and reason to oppose the government, not for the purpose and reason to have a blast at Glastonbury, right? But they're successful in doing it whenever they put it to effect. So, that's what my approach is from this Gemini thing. I can do it. Not everyone will be able to do it because they don't all know the law and the rights, but a lot of people aren't bothered. They just want to go turn up and protest and turn up in numbers, right? So I don't really know what's going to happen. I'm not sure what's going to happen with it at all because, like, the right to privacy is one of the main things, and it's the right to privacy that ties it all together. The right to privacy is the hub of the whole thing. So all the things that Big Brother Watch are doing over facial recognition and digital ID, and all the things that I've looked at with the DVLA and the Ombudsman website and the petitions website, and even using this Gemini now, it's all about access to information. And that's what Tony Blair's agenda was, freedom of information. But we don't have access to information, of, private companies or corporate entities, or, I can't say, to AI, analyze all the things that, Larry Ellison's got his computer. But they want access to hours on that, what they've been spending, are they breaking tax laws? Are they committing crimes in their own house? Freedom of speech in Scotland, you don't have freedom of speech, But what about, are the newspapers, been charging us VAT on newspapers and we're not supposed to pay it? What about all the materials that we've bought to make our signs and banners with, which are not going to be taxed on, right? There's no clear way to claim it back at the moment. So there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of other cases that I need to put together just for little bits, little things, big things, that fit in between all this, but a lot of people aren't bothered about. But it's important. It's very important for financial purposes. I mean, a Big Brother Watch have probably got their finances, perfectly in order, but maybe they could be putting more newspaper adverts themselves. Maybe Big Brother Watch is successful, but maybe it might even have been more successful if it, could have put, like, for example, more newspaper adverts or things like that. But I don't think they probably had a problem with it because they're registered, that their organisation is fully registered. It's more like smaller groups and bodies, like people who are doing petitions to Parliament, right? And actually there should be a lot more successful smaller bodies, political bodies, than there currently are, because people are usually just subscribing to larger ones. But the way that YouTube's set up, people are throwing money at YouTube now, even paying. You pay to socialise now. You pay to join, for a cup of coffee. You can join for the cost of a cup of coffee. You can become an inner circle person of, the pastry guys, or Neil Oliver, or, Steve Barrett with his Lovelies or whatever, right? But that's paying. You don't pay to be someone's friend. You don't pay to be in the inner circle. This is the difference between friends and fans, right? But they're wanting now friendship to be a business, social circles to be a business. And that's where I'm like, this is where I'm like, what are they doing? selling mugs and t-shirts and all this type of stuff, you know, getting everyone to sell and buy mugs and t-shirts and stuff like that. So, you know, what's going to happen? I don't know. I've got substantial evidence on this government now. There's some real substantial evidence on this government, against this government, all different aspects of it, and it needs to be confirmed and confessed, right? Because it's not like, you know, the street dregs or the, you know, working class or whatever, or who are the, you know, like, the government shouldn't be pointing their finger at common people like, oh, no, you're criminals, right? These people are in positions of public trust. We trust them to tell the truth. That's why they take the oath, and that's supposedly why they get the honours. Yet they're lying, cheating, and doing dirty